We have some mechanisms for emergency response funding that we already have in place. The first one is that we're able to repurpose some of our development sponsorship funding. Secondly, our field officers are encouraged to create some small amounts of reserve funding for emergency response. And then thirdly, in terms of the appeals for the large-scale emergencies, the decision-making around the use of those funds is more with the field, with the response, rather than with the fundraising office. Max, you have some examples of how that was used in Southern Africa?
For instance, in DRC, the resource from the long-term development projects was used to procure the personal protective equipment, which was distributed to frontline workers from the government. In addition, in DRC, they also used part of that money as match for grant application.
In relation to the repurposing of the sponsorship, the development money, normally you need to spend it within the development area. So we adapted our processes whereby the money could be spent both within the development area, but also in communities outside of the development area. So it could be spent anywhere within the country. Secondly, the monies that were repurposed for emergency from the development programming, we created one large pool within each field office. So we had a large pool of money, private money, flexible money that was available. And then thirdly, in relation to the appeal funds that came in for COVID response, we were able to accumulate all of that and then allocate it to the more poorly resourced countries.
For countries that pooled the resources at a country level, were then able to implement programs outside of their regular areas. But there are also countries that decided to just adapt their programming within the same areas where they've always operated.
What worked, as I was saying, it gave the national officers a lot of agility and flexibility. The other thing was where we have some more poorly resourced projects, we were able to allocate or support those projects better by transferring some of the funds from one community response to another. I think it worked because we had a very effective partnership coordination. We had some good policies in place to support emergency response, but we adapted them to make them even more useful in this response. Can you perhaps illustrate how some of this played out in Southern Africa?
It enhanced the autonomy to the country office, but also the centralized reporting made a difference as people didn't have to focus on developing a unique information management system themselves.
If other agencies were able to encourage their field officers to have small amounts of reserve funding available so that in the event of an emergency, a local emergency, they're able to get moving quickly. And the other thing which really worked well for us was we had policies in place already so that we could repurpose some funds from our development portfolio across to the emergencies. Max, are you able to add to that?
One of the instruments that has been spoken about within the humanitarian sector for a long time relates to crisis modifiers. In principle, everyone is in agreement that there should be flexibility in any funding that is made available to any organization. But in practice, this has not been the case, or even when there is some kind of provision, it's too small to facilitate any meaningful assessment or any meaningful launch of a response.